There comes a point in life where your peace, your time, and your self-respect must be guarded like sacred ground. Because not every offense deserves your patience, and not every person deserves access to you. Some behaviors, no matter how common they've become, are not minor flaws to overlook. They are signals, alarms, warnings that reveal a deeper issue, the absence of virtue, the erosion of character, and the refusal to take responsibility for one's own soul. In a world that often teaches us to tolerate everything in the name of peace, the Stoic sees clearly. Peace without boundaries is not peace, it's surrender. And surrendering to those who continually dishonor your dignity is not compassion. It is complicity in your own destruction. What we permit, we promote. What we allow, we reinforce. And the behaviors we ignore in others eventually become the standards we accept for ourselves. This is not about becoming harsh or unforgiving. It's about becoming precise, discerning, anchored in principle. The Stoics believed that our external world may be chaotic, but our internal world must remain sovereign. And to preserve that sovereignty, there must be lines that are not crossed. There must be moments when you say, "This ends here," not out of anger, but out of clarity, not from spite, but from strength. Because the more you excuse what is clearly wrong, the more you teach others that your values are negotiable. And once your values are negotiable, your identity begins to dissolve. That's why this video is not just a list of behaviors, it's a reminder, a call to return to your own moral backbone, a recentering around what you know deep down should never be tolerated, no matter who it comes from. Let this be a declaration not to others but to yourself, that your life, your energy, your time, and your peace are too precious to be spent managing the emotional debris of those who refuse to grow. And when you begin to live with that level of conviction, people will adjust, or they will leave. Either way, you win. Because you finally stopped abandoning yourself just to make others comfortable. Now let's begin. 7 behaviors that must be addressed, confronted, and if necessary, walked away from with dignity, with calm, and with unshakable inner strength. Number 1. Constant lying. There is a quiet but devastating truth about lies. They are not simply distortions of facts. They are fractures in trust. A single lie, no matter how small, is never just about the content of the untruth. It's about the character of the person speaking it. Because to lie, especially over something insignificant, is to reveal something far more dangerous than deception. It reveals a willingness to manipulate reality for personal convenience. And that is not a flaw, it is a pattern, a habit of mind that corrodes integrity from the inside out. The Stoics, masters of clarity and self-discipline, were not concerned merely with truth in speech. They were obsessed with the alignment between inner values and outer actions. To them, lying was not only a moral failure but a practical one, because it shattered coherence. A person who lies, especially over small matters, is not only untrustworthy when it counts, they are undisciplined at their core. They have not trained their soul to endure discomfort, and so they reach for the escape hatch of falsehood when reality feels inconvenient. And here lies the deeper danger. Someone who lies about the small things will lie about the big things, not because the stakes changed, but because their nature didn't. A person who has learned to bend truth for something trivial will have no resistance to doing the same when their reputation, comfort, or self-image is on the line. They are not anchored in principle, they are adrift in utility. They speak not to convey truth, but to craft perception. And when you are in their presence, you are not relating to a person, you are relating to a performance. From a Stoic perspective, trust is sacred, not because people are perfect, but because trust creates the very conditions under which virtue can grow. If I cannot trust your words, I cannot trust your promises. If I cannot trust your promises, I cannot trust your choices. And if I cannot trust your choices, I cannot build anything meaningful with you. Not friendship, not partnership, not peace. What many fail to see is that tolerating small lies is not kindness, it is complicity. Each time you ignore a lie, justify it, or pretend it didn't matter, you are training yourself to live in a reality shaped by illusion. And eventually, the person who lies is no longer the only one distorting truth. You are too. Because the lie you now live with is the belief that it won't cost you anything. But it always does. Lies cost peace of mind, they cost time, they cost self-respect, and worst of all, they cost clarity, the most valuable asset in a Stoic life. So what do? You don't argue. You don't chase apologies. You observe. You listen. You measure the gap between what they say and what they do. And you decide. Not out of anger, but from alignment with your values. When someone shows you they treat truth casually, you treat them with distance. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-respect. Not to punish them, but to protect the sanctity of your own word. Because when a man or woman lives by truth, not performance, not convenience, their presence becomes a source of calm. You know where they stand. You know where you stand with them. And that level of clarity, in a world full of smoke and mirrors, is not just rare, it is priceless. So remember, the person who lies without reason is already telling you who they are. Don't wait for the bigger betrayal to confirm what the smaller ones already revealed. Trust your discernment, guard your circle, and let your own word remain pure, not just as a promise to others, but as a daily discipline of self-honor. Number 2. Disrespect. There's a specific kind of silence that follows disrespect, not the silence of weakness or submission, but the silence of realization. It's the still moment when you finally understand that the person speaking to you does not see you, not truly, and perhaps never did. Disrespect is not merely about raised voices or harsh words. It often arrives quietly, hidden beneath sarcasm, subtle condescension, or that cold tone that makes you feel small without reason. But in all its forms, it carries the same message. You don't matter as much as I do. And once that message is delivered, you must choose how loudly your dignity will respond. The Stoics understood that external actions are not what define us, our reactions do. But make no mistake, choosing not to argue is not the same as allowing disrespect to continue. It is a higher form of strength, one that refuses to descend into the mud to wrestle with ego. Arguing with someone who talks down to you does not restore your worth. It simply places your peace into their hands. And the moment you try to explain your value to someone who has already chosen not to see it, you've already lost the argument, because your worth is not up for debate. A person who disrespects others is not in control. They are ruled by their own insecurity. They seek power not by elevating themselves through virtue or wisdom, but by reducing others in volume, tone, and presence. It is a false power, built on shallow pride and the illusion of superiority. But just because their foundation is hollow does not mean you should allow them to build upon your silence. Because the more you tolerate subtle put-downs, the more they become normalized, and soon what once startled you becomes your baseline, and what once wounded you becomes your routine. The Stoic response to disrespect is not fury, nor is it silence rooted in fear. It is calm, confident boundary. It is the decision to walk away without fanfare, not because you lack a response, but because your energy is too sacred to be wasted proving yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. There is no need for final speeches, no need for dramatic exits. Sometimes the loudest statement you can make is no statement at all, just a clean exit, no explanation, no defense, just distance, because you were not made to be small. You were not born to shrink in the presence of loud mouths and fragile egos. You were born to stand tall in your values, to speak clearly when it matters, and to withdraw when it no longer does. And when someone disrespects you, whether in private or in front of others, your first duty is not to educate them. Your first duty is to yourself, to your stillness, to your peace. Some will tell you that cutting people off is immature, that you should forgive, explain, reason. But wisdom knows the difference between forgiveness and foolishness, and it is not cruelty to step away from those who habitually chip away at your self-worth. It is clarity. The same way you would not drink poisoned water because someone offered it with a smile, you must not accept poisoned speech simply because it comes from someone close to you. You are allowed to expect basic respect. You are allowed to say nothing, and still make a decision. You are allowed to preserve your energy for people who speak to you with decency, not because you're sensitive, but because you're sovereign. And your soul was not made to beg for kindness. It was made to reflect it, to live it, and to surround itself with people who embody it, not just when they feel good, but especially when they don't get their way. So the next time someone talks down to you, don't stoop down to their level trying to correct them. Rise above in silence. Not to prove superiority, but to reclaim your space. Not to punish them, but to protect your peace. Not to win the moment, but to win back your clarity. Because in the end, those who respect themselves deeply cannot stomach disrespect for long. Their silence is not confusion, it is conviction. Their departure is not impulsive, it is earned. And their life, over time, becomes a reflection of the invisible line they refused to let others cross. Number 3, blaming others for everything. There is a particular kind of weakness that hides behind loud accusations, the kind that constantly points fingers outward while never turning inward. The person who blames others for everything that goes wrong in their life is not just lacking maturity. They are rejecting the very foundation of personal power, responsibility. In Stoic philosophy, this refusal to own one's part in life is the surest path to internal chaos. Because when you hand over the blame, you also hand over your control. The truth is, a life spent blaming others is a life trapped in a permanent state of reaction. It is a posture of emotional childhood, one where every inconvenience becomes someone else's fault, every failure a conspiracy, and every painful truth an external injustice. These people are not interested in growth. They are interested in escape, and their favorite escape route is through the backs of others. But here's the danger. When you surround yourself with those who refuse accountability, you absorb their patterns. You start walking on eggshells around their moods. You start taking responsibility for their irresponsibility. And soon, your energy is spent cleaning up messes you didn't create, just to keep the peace. The Stoics would call this a forfeiture of your inner citadel, a surrender of your agency. In a world governed by cause and effect, no one is exempt from the consequences of their actions. But to the habitual blamer, consequences are always unfair. They rewrite reality to protect their ego. If they fail at work, it's because of the manager. If a relationship ends, it's because of how the other person treated them. If life feels hard, it's because the world is out to get them. But never once do they ask, what part did I play in this? That question terrifies them, because it requires humility, courage, and the will to evolve. And this is where the Stoic lens becomes vital. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily that the behavior of others is not within our control, only our responses. But in this equation, we also learn the opposite truth. If someone is never willing to control their own behavior, they will always end up controlling yours. Because every complaint becomes an emotional hook, every guilt trip a way to manipulate, every excuse a means to dodge the truth. And if you don't draw a firm boundary, you will find yourself emotionally imprisoned by someone who refuses to grow up. To blame is easy, to examine yourself is hard, to criticize others is convenient. But to reflect honestly, to admit fault, to course correct, to own your impact, that is the path of strength. That is the path the Stoics walked, not because they were perfect, but because they understood this. A person who refuses to take responsibility is choosing to remain powerless. And a powerless person who feels entitled is one of the most dangerous combinations in the social world. Now understand this clearly. We all make mistakes, we all have blind spots, but the difference lies in how we respond when we are confronted with our own errors. A wise person listens, adjusts, and grows. A proud fool deflects, blames, and repeats. And when you identify the latter in someone's behavior, not once but consistently, believe what you see. Because those who blame others for everything will one day blame you, even if all you did was try to help. There is no peace in a relationship with someone who refuses to see themselves clearly. Whether it's friendship, family, or love, if every conflict becomes a courtroom and you're always the one on trial, you are not in a relationship. You are in a performance a performance where your role is to carry their emotional baggage while they pretend they're weightless. So how do you deal with this? You step back, not with bitterness, but with resolve. You stop arguing with people committed to being right over being real. You stop offering insight where there is no openness, and most importantly, you stop trying to rescue those who refuse to rescue themselves. Because accountability cannot be forced, it must be chosen. And until they choose it, your presence will only become their next excuse. There is wisdom in leaving someone exactly where they've decided to stand. If they'd rather protect their ego than repair their behavior, let them. If they'd rather blame you for their discomfort than face the truth, so be it. Your job is not to drag them into maturity. Your job is to protect your peace, speak your truth, and walk with people who value growth over image. Blame is a mask. Responsibility is a mirror. And the longer someone avoids their reflection, the more distorted their perception becomes, not just of themselves, but of everyone around them. So when the pattern becomes clear, act accordingly. Distance yourself. Reclaim your clarity. Because those who never look inward will always look for someone else to blame, and if you're too close, that someone will be you. Number 4, gossiping. There is something deceptively small about gossip. The way it's whispered, the way it hides behind humor or fake concern, the way it disguises itself as truth-telling or storytelling. But don't be fooled. In the Stoic worldview, gossip is not an innocent flaw. It is a betrayal in slow motion. Because those who speak casually about the private lives of others are not revealing their knowledge, they are revealing their character. And if their loyalty can be traded so cheaply in one conversation, it will be bartered again in the next, especially when you're no longer in the room. Gossip is the currency of the weak. It gives the illusion of closeness, of shared understanding, of camaraderie. But in reality, it's rooted in judgment, insecurity, and the desperate attempt to feel important by pulling someone else down. It's the cheapest form of connection, built not on mutual respect or shared values, but on the carcasses of reputations not present to defend themselves. And here's what most people miss. The one who gossips with you is rehearsing the very lines they'll use when gossiping about you. The Stoics were ruthless in their rejection of idle talk. Epictetus warned not only against speaking ill of others, but against listening to those who do. Because to entertain gossip is to become complicit in its poison. Every time you nod along, stay silent, or indulge the spectacle of another person's flaws being dissected, you become a silent participant in the erosion of virtue, both theirs and yours. Gossip thrives where there is no discipline of thought. It feeds on speculation, assumption, and envy disguised as concern. Did you hear what happened? Can you believe they did that? I probably shouldn't say this, but these phrases may sound like passing moments, but they are the seeds of distrust. And once they take root, no relationship can grow strong. Because once you start to question whether someone truly guards what is sacred, you stop sharing what matters. You start withholding. You armor up. A person who gossips about others is showing you one thing above all. They are disloyal to what is not useful to their image. They will trade your confidence for attention, your secrets for influence, your struggles for a momentary sense of superiority. And when tested, they will choose entertainment over integrity every time. This isn't harsh judgment, it's clear seeing. Because if someone tears down others to lift themselves up, they are revealing that their sense of self was never stable to begin with. In the Stoic tradition, the tongue was seen as a blade, one to be mastered, not unleashed. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. To gossip is to become a mirror of the very weakness we claim to despise in others. But to stay silent, to speak only what builds, to protect the dignity of those not present, this is power. This is character. And this is how trust is born and maintained. Think of it like this. Every time someone shares gossip with you, they are testing you. Maybe not consciously, but they are watching. How much will you entertain? Will you contribute? Will you keep it going? Or will you draw the quiet boundary that says, I do not deal in shadows? The Stoics would not waste time on what they could not control. but they would never let themselves become a vessel for another's destruction either. If someone gossips freely, it means they do not respect boundaries, not emotional ones, not ethical ones, and eventually, that disregard will reach you. Today it's someone else's story. Tomorrow, it's yours. Because the gossip doesn't stop once the subject changes, it simply moves to the next target. And the moment you're no longer useful, agreeable, or present, the knives come out. So what do? You create distance, not necessarily out of anger, but out of clarity. You don't need to confront or expose them. That's ego. Instead, you simply stop feeding the fire. You change the subject, you offer no reward for their drama, and over time, they'll either shift their behavior or seek someone else who plays along. Either outcome is a victory. Gossip is a small act that reveals a large truth, that some people do not yet know how to carry the weight of real connection. They prefer the cheap thrill of control over the quiet power of loyalty. But as someone seeking to live with discipline and intention, you must protect your space from this contagion. Not because you are better, but because you know better. Speak less. Observe more. And when someone shows you they cannot be trusted with the stories of others, trust that they cannot be trusted with yours either. Number 5. Crossing your boundaries. There is a quiet moment, almost invisible, when a person tests your limits. It may come wrapped in humor, veiled as a joke, disguised as a small favor, or cloaked in the language of just this once. And if you are not grounded in your own sense of worth, if you have not made peace with the possibility of disappointing others, you may let it slide. You may rationalize, minimize, or convince yourself that it's not worth making a fuss over something so small. But make no mistake, in that moment something fundamental is at stake. Not just your time, not just your comfort, but your sovereignty. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are the architecture of self-respect. They are the visible shape of your invisible values. And like any structure, their strength is measured not by how beautiful they are when no pressure is applied, but by how firmly they hold when pushed. When you allow someone to inch past your boundary, even slightly, what you are really teaching them is that your lines are drawn in sand, not stone. And people, even unconsciously, will begin to treat your space as negotiable, your presence as optional, and your value as conditional. The Stoics would remind us what is within your control is your choice. You may not control how others behave, but you can always choose what you allow. To say no without apology is not cruelty, it is clarity. To enforce your limits without guilt is not coldness, it is inner alignment. And to walk away from those who repeatedly cross your boundaries is not dramatic, it is discipline. Because tolerating the erosion of your dignity, one small act at a time, is not compassion, it is self-abandonment. There's a reason Epictetus said, "Don't explain your philosophy, embody it." If you say you value peace, then stop entertaining chaos. If you say you value honesty, stop accepting manipulation. If you say you value your time, stop surrendering it to those who treat it like a disposable resource. The boundary is not a punishment, it's a mirror. It shows you who is capable of respecting your world and who is only here to reshape it in their favor. And understand this, those who truly respect you will never ask you to betray yourself to make them comfortable. They will not flinch at your limits because they have some of their own. But those who pout, protest, guilt trip, or gaslight when you assert your boundaries are revealing something vital, that your self-respect is inconvenient to their control. And that is exactly the kind of person you must learn to disappoint without apology. So the next time someone tests your boundaries, pay close attention. The small push is not harmless, it's a probe. And if you fold, they won't retreat, they'll advance. Because what you allow is what will continue. And what you tolerate teaches others how to treat you. If your peace must be disturbed, let it be disturbed for the right reasons. Not because you were afraid of being misunderstood. Not because you feared conflict, but because you forgot who you are. Draw the line. Hold the line. And if necessary, walk away from anyone who mistakes your kindness for permission to invade your soul. Number 6. Playing the victim to avoid responsibility. There is a distinct difference between someone who is in pain and someone who performs pain. True suffering humbles. It softens the ego, invites growth, and often makes a person more compassionate toward others. But there is another kind of posture, more dangerous and deceptive, where suffering is weaponized not as a call for understanding, but as a shield against accountability. This is not vulnerability. This is performance. And the moment someone starts using their wounds as an excuse to avoid ownership, you are no longer dealing with honesty, you are dealing with manipulation. The Stoics taught that we must distinguish between what happens to us and how we choose to respond. Life can wound you. It can leave you betrayed, abandoned, misjudged, or broken. But even then, your logos, your inner reason, remains your own. To weaponize your suffering, to turn every disagreement into a drama, every correction into cruelty, every boundary into betrayal, is not only to deny your own agency, but to erode the integrity of relationships built on truth. Those who constantly play the victim do not want healing, they want power without responsibility. They position themselves at the center of every storm, not to seek shelter, but to attract sympathy that can be converted into influence. And once that dynamic is in place, they will use guilt like currency. You become cautious with your words, careful with your boundaries, hesitant to disagree, because they have turned their pain into a silent threat. Challenge me, and you'll be the villain in my story. Marcus Aurelius would remind us, if it is endurable, then endure it. If not, then stop complaining. That is not a lack of compassion, it is a call to dignity. The Stoic doesn't deny suffering, they refuse to be defined by it. They do not collapse into their emotions, they observe them, learn from them, and rise above them. Because self-respect is not found in how loudly we cry for justice, but in how quietly we take responsibility for what is ours to carry. When someone always paints themselves as the wronged party yet never asks, "What part did I play?" you are witnessing the death of growth. And when they turn every confrontation into a crisis, every feedback into an attack, you must understand, this is not a person seeking peace, it is a person defending their fragility at the cost of everyone around them. And in that space, reason dies. Dialogue becomes impossible, and progress non-existent. Do not mistake emotional chaos for depth. Do not confuse endless stories of betrayal for honesty. And do not believe that a person who refuses to take responsibility for their own choices is somehow a victim of everyone else. Because the one thing that makes us human, truly noble, is our capacity to own our flaws, to change, to stand upright even when we are tempted to fall into blame. And yes, compassion matters, but compassion must never come at the expense of clarity. You can offer empathy without offering your silence. You can understand someone's pain without excusing their manipulation. And you can walk away from those who twist their suffering into a tool to control you, not because you lack kindness, but because you value truth. In the end, life does not demand perfection from us. It demands honesty. And there is nothing honest about hiding from yourself behind the illusion of helplessness. Number 7, backhanded compliments. There's a peculiar kind of praise that doesn't lift you up, but leaves a subtle sting. A compliment dressed in sarcasm, a smile wrapped around a dagger. Wow, I could never pull that off. You're surprisingly articulate for someone like you. Must be nice to have things handed to you. These are not accidents of speech. These are calculated remarks, designed to blur the line between admiration and insult. And once you've heard enough of them, you begin to realize they were never meant to praise you. They were meant to punish you softly. The Stoics warned us not only about the blunt force of anger, but the quiet poisons of resentment, those that operate not in outbursts, but in subtle digs and hidden barbs. A true compliment is clean. It's free of conditions. It is given without expectation and received without confusion. But a backhanded compliment is something else entirely. It is the envy of someone who wants to appear noble while undermining you at the same time. What makes this behavior so corrosive is not its loudness, but its subtlety. A person who insults you to your face declares themselves your opponent. You know where you stand. But someone who wraps their resentment in charm, They destabilize your footing. They make you question your instincts. Was that a compliment or a critique? Am I being celebrated or mocked? And that is precisely the point. Envy by nature is cowardly. It rarely confronts. It corrodes from the shadows. It doesn't want to destroy you directly. It wants you to self-destruct, to doubt yourself, to feel guilty for your strength and confused by your success. As Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little, but the man who craves more, who is poor. The one who envies you may wear the mask of a friend, but behind it lives a war they are waging silently, and you are the battlefield." The Stoic perspective demands that we train ourselves not just to hear what is said, but to see what is behind the words. Backhanded compliments are not about you. They are confessions, thinly veiled admissions of inadequacy, inferiority, and hidden competition. A Stoic, unmoved by flattery and unshaken by insult, recognizes these games without participating in them. He does not retaliate. He does not collapse into insecurity. He simply observes and remembers. Remember this: a person who truly celebrates you will never feel the need to diminish you in the same breath. A person who truly respects you won't need to balance their praise with a jab to feel superior again. And a person who is at peace with themselves will never try to make you feel unsure about your worth. You owe it to your dignity not to explain yourself to those who disguise envy as humor. You owe it to your clarity not to decode every cryptic sentence from someone who doesn't even know how to be honest with themselves. And most of all, you owe it to your growth to surround yourself with those who offer light, not those who hide needles inside their smiles. There is a kind of silence that is louder than confrontation. When someone gives you a backhanded compliment, let your silence remind them that you are not confused. Let your stillness unsettle them, not because you seek revenge, but because you refuse to validate their hidden hostility with your attention. As Epictetus would have said, "It's not what they say, but how you respond that determines your power." So stand calm, stand clear, and never forget, respect is built not by proving your worth to the envious, but by refusing to shrink in the presence of their disguised attacks. There comes a moment in every life when silence becomes clarity. When you stop excusing, justifying, or tolerating what gnaws at your peace, and in that moment, something shifts, not in the world, but in you. You no longer explain why you deserve respect. You embody it. The Stoics taught that external chaos cannot disturb a mind that has learned to govern itself. But that doesn't mean tolerating disrespect under the guise of patience. True self-mastery is not passive, it's discerning. It knows when to speak, when to walk away, and when to draw a line so clearly that no one dares to cross it again. You see, life is not just about what you accept, but what you refuse to accept. Tolerating dishonesty, manipulation, boundary violations, and false kindness doesn't make you noble. It makes you vulnerable to erosion. Slowly, silently, your self-respect crumbles under the weight of what you allow. And so, the work is this: to become a fortress with open doors, kind but not naive, understanding but not permissive, calm but never submissive. When you make the decision to walk away from what insults your soul, the world will resist, but your inner world will finally breathe. Let the message be clear, not only to others, but to yourself. These behaviors end where your self-respect begins. Draw the line. Hold it. And never again let it be crossed by those who mistake your kindness for weakness. Your peace is not negotiable.